Well, welcome back to the Ultimate Athlete Concepts podcast series. We are in our second installment of Off the Track Training with Henk Kraaijenhof of the Netherlands. Very successful track and field coach, sprint coach specifically. And we spoke with Henk last week, got a lot of great information, and we're going to be taking that the next step with how he oversees or would advise overseeing the off the track training with his sprinters and other athletes. So Henk, welcome. Really glad to have you back again. A lot of great information last time. I'm looking forward to it again. So welcome aboard.
Okay, thank you.
And we have Jeff Moyer with us as always, as our technical advisor and helping us out with questions as well. So last week, Henk, we talked about, just kind of an introduction of how you approach the weight room. And I think one of the biggest things that that was key and would be considered kind of a little bit novel in the United States was that you train for power and you really stay away from maximum strength training, really high intensity stuff, kind of staying away from anything that was above 80%. And that's unusual in the United States. You see a lot of high intensity work done here in the U.S. And what you're saying is, look, that's not gonna work in the long term. You're going to recruit a lot more slow twitch fibers and not recruit the fast twitch fibers, which are obviously critical in sprinting. Yep. So with a takeoff from where we talked about last week, I think one of the interesting things was, number one, the percentages that you worked in and the repetitions that you worked in, which are not to exhaustion. That leads to another question, which is, depending on the time of the year, I know it's going to vary, but what would you say a normal volume range would look like for a particular exercise? So if you go in, I'll give you an example so that it makes sense. Let's say you're going in, you're going to squat 60% today, let's say, for example. What would a normal volume range look like? Because I know that power is going to drop at some point, in that training session. And I know that it's going to vary too. And it could vary on the day for the same athlete. But what would you say a general idea would, what do you normally see?
Okay, considering that we take into account the drop in velocity of the bar. If it drops more than 10% from what you can do in a 1 repetition maximum or your best of 5, it doesn't really matter what you measure, that's 100% velocity or 100% power of the bar. Then when it drops more than 10%, we quit. And most of the time it's somewhere between 6 and 8 reps, almost independent of the percentage. So it's 40%, 50%, 60%, 30%. It's almost independent because it depends on the intensity and the quality of the how you execute it. Okay. And it's pretty much demanding on the nervous system, on your attention, on your focus, on how you concentrate on this each repetition. You go sloppy work. No, bam. I want to see high quality all the time.
It's even though it's not maximum intensity, the effort is maximum. The volitional effort is maximum. You're really trying to go as hard as you can, as fast as you can.
Well, yeah, you go to try. It doesn't really matter if you measure or not. It doesn't really matter what weight you take. 90% of your 1 RM or 20% of your 1 RM or 30 or 50. It doesn't matter. Any rep you execute with the maximum possible velocity of the bar.
Yes.
Dependent of the weight. Now, you just raised an interesting issue. What is the intensity? Because if you do bench press with 10 reps and the first rep is really fast and number 10 is just struggling and a lot slower, did the intensity drop or did it stay the same? Most people think, well, the intensity is still, let's say you started with 100 kilogram at 220 pounds. If this is the intensity of the first and the last rep is the same because the weight stayed the same. And I will say, well, that's the intensity only expressed in weight. But if you express the intensity of velocity or power output or muscular recruitment, you will see the intensity drops. So here's the thing. What is the definition of intensity in weight training? Is it the power output? Is it just the weight in pounds? Or is it, for instance, the EMG activity? Because that's what you're aiming for. You want to recruit muscle fibers, as many as you can.
Right.
So it kind of questions the definition of intensity, basically. Now, if you have 8 reps, and then the intensity drops more than 90%, we repeat it, let me say 4 sets, and then you got 32 reps. For any exercise, it doesn't matter if it's leg press or it's squats or it's bench press. It doesn't really matter that much. So we're looking about somewhere between 25 and 40 reps.
Right. So you'll see. So basically, what you're saying, 4 or 5. Like if you were at a 5 rep set, you'd be like 4 or 5, 6 sets maybe, depending on how. I mean, you're still watching it to see if it drops. But I know that you normally will see. I know that over the course of your career, you probably saw trends where it's normally, within this particular range. It's not dramatically different from one workout to the next.
No. The only thing is that you really take the quality into account. You can if you have a sharp eye, you can see the intensity drop, and the athlete starts to struggle. And he starts to struggle because the fat fibers drop out, and he's only working with his slow fibers. And once again, it might not be what you want.
Yeah,
you don't
right.
The size or the percentage of slow fibers.
So if you're working, let's say 6 repetitions where it drops off, and then you normally will see, let's say 5 sets, maybe 6 sets, maybe 30 reps.
A little bit less, because it's pretty demanding.
So you would probably expect to see somewhere in the 20 repetition range.
Yeah, 20, 25 repetitions. That's about.
And this is kind of what's interesting is that's very congruent with when I've talked with Dr. Bondarchuk or with one of his throwers, is that they have a lot of stuff that's in the 5 repetition range with around 5 sets. That's the bulk of their year. Now it'll vary some.
Yeah.
But it looks, there's a similarity, and that's the bulk of their year. I would say maybe 75% of the year will be somewhere in this 5 repetition, maybe 5 set range, give or take.
Also take into consideration that you're talking to elite athletes here. We're not talking to 14-year-old kids here.
Right.
They have to learn how to lift a weight, they have to learn how to get a little bit stronger, have to gain a little bit of muscle and muscle mass. That's something else. But we're talking elite explosive athletes here, right?
Yeah, right. Now we should have qualified that, because later on I'm going to ask you in subsequent podcasts, talk to you about how do you bring that younger athlete up to this elite level? What is that process like? Because it's totally different. And it's one of the things I think that is most missing in the United States is how do you transition from low to medium to high level? Because in the United States, most of the stuff that we've translated, our company, it was written for high level athletes. And I have to remind people of that when they ask questions. This wasn't meant for your high school kid. This is meant for an elite athlete.
Mistake is made anywhere that you just copy the programs of Bondarchuk or Verkhoshansky, but those were elite triple jumpers, those were elite hammer throwers, and then they apply it to 15-year-old kids.
Yeah,
that's not very smart. Let me say that.
It doesn't work. And this is done a lot in the United States, trying to adapt really intense models. They've even tried to adapt some of the Bulgarian weightlifting models to American football for kids that are in high school, and it's terrible. You're going to kill them.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big mistake to copy somebody else's training, but which you don't know the context or the environment where it was done. You don't know these guys were at the doctor, at the physio, at their side. They were like 4 or 5 people around him to take care of him in the medical and preventional side and therapy and recovery specialist for 1 or 2 athletes only.
Yeah,
that's different from having 50 guys in the weight room and have it try to do the same thing and still recover.
Yeah, most of that stuff was done with a team of people around just a few elite athletes, and they had a whole team.
And weightlifters mainly.
Yeah.
Not American football players, because for a weightlifter, the main priority is to lift weights as heavy as you can.
Right.
For an American football player, it's great to be strong, but if you can't catch a ball and if you can't sprint, then everything stops.
Exactly. And this is lost a lot in the United States.
Contact. So that happens quite a lot, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Gross misapplications of some of these ideas. When you're talking volume, somewhere in that 20-25 range, Does that change over time, or do you see that being consistent, in general, just in a general kind of way? Is it generally stay within that range?
It stays within that range,
Okay.
absolutely. Because
Okay.
number one, if you decrease it, then well, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
You're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
If you increase it, go back to 15 reps. Well, sometimes you see athletes first they drop the velocity at 6 reps, and then a couple of months later, then they drop the velocity at 8 or 9 reps. That's fine. But then you increase the weight again because they get stronger and more powerful. So it also adds to being able to repeat more repetitions at a high quality. But it's not that they go up to 20 reps at the same velocity. If they can do that, then for sure they weren't working at 100% when you tested them.
So yeah, right, right. So that actually leads to the next question, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Here most of us look when they look at improvement, they look at progressive overload in terms of the weight being used. So
Yeah.
if you can do, let's say, 200 kilograms with 150 kilograms or 200 kilograms for, let's say, 8 reps, then you bump it.
Yeah.
And then you keep bumping the weight. Well, this is not the case with this type of training. What would you say the normal adaptation process is if you go in, you say, okay, it's 100 kilograms today, guys. We're going to use, and we're going to do 5 sets and we're going to 5 reps, give or take. What is the normal adaptation process to that particular weight? And because I know this curve of bringing the weight up is going to be much slower. What does that look like? What do you typically see? How long do you stay with that same weight?
4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
You keep it for 4 to 6 weeks, and then you see a change. You see the force velocity curve and the force power curve change, and hopefully into the right direction. So you may get stronger and faster and can generate more power as a result of that. It's significant. Even you can see probably a small change after a week, but that's not the real. That's probably because you learn how to do it. You learn the trick. If you bench press. For the first time in your life, do the bench press with, let me say, 60 pounds. And then next week, you're already stronger, not because you're stronger, basically, but you learn to use the right muscle groups in that movement. It's more a learning process than that you recruit muscle fibers or that you get leave alone that you get hypertrophy in 1 week. That's impossible. So 4 to 6 weeks, and then in general, we increase the load. It depends a little bit on the exercise, but in general, you can say with around 10 kilograms is 22 pounds. So if in squats you work with 100 kilograms, then in 4 weeks you work with 110 and then 120.
So you do see a progressive overload, but you see them in increments of 4 to 6 weeks normally.
Yeah, because they increased their 1 repetition maximum, and what was 100% in the first week is not the same 100%, so they get stronger.
Right.
And that's why the percentage of 40% or 50% also increases, and that's this 10 kilogram in general, or 20 pounds.
That's an interesting thought, because this is where one of the questions would lie with, like, looking at this is, how did, and you just answered the question, but what it was how do you know what 1RM is at the end of 6 weeks again? You know what I mean? Because you're not going to go back and check it. You're not going to put them under 100% load.
No.
But you want to kind of get this feel. And what you're saying is, from your experience, what you found is around with athletes at that level, around the 10 kilogram or so difference, it's going to be, that's what's going to be the shift in the percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes 15, and bench press it's more like 5 kilograms on the beginners. The more advanced athletes, it's around 10 kilograms. You get 20 pounds more on the bar. And then that's still the weight in which I can express the maximum power output.
And obviously, you're still measuring it. So you're going back when you add that new weight, you're measuring the speed of the bar, and the speed of the bar is not somewhere in the range of where it was at the previous levels. If it's way lower, then you know that you went a little too high, maybe.
Yeah, it's not from insecurity from my side that I measured it, but also from curiosity, what will happen. So I understood the process in here, and I understood the time frame for individual athletes and exercise-wise. It's not the insecurity that I know that in the end, if you have more experience, then you don't measure everything all the time. Measuring is only a means to an end. It's not an end in its an end in itself, or becomes a goal in itself to measure everything that you do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just get a lot of data, and that's not very.
It's funny. That's one thing that I noticed with Dr. Bondarchuk when we spoke about this, is that he doesn't measure anything. He just tells them, "Do this." Here's what I want you to do, and the athlete just does it.
Things. You have to measure the young coach to increase your to understand.
Yeah.
To understand as an experienced coach, you don't have your stopwatch ready and don't have to lift the weights and you have the power and measure everything all the time because you know already.
Right.
Yeah?
It speaks to the experience aspect that you already know what the outcome should look like, and and your athlete, you've been with your athlete enough too, so they know too. If something isn't right, they would say something if they notice something's not the same.
I'm not public about it. I want to understand, and I'm checking it once in a while so I don't make a mistake. I monitor it, but I'm not neurotic that I want to control every rep and every set and every workout and then with machine, and that's also pretty taxing for the athletes as well.
Well, it's a little bit of slightly different subject matter, but I've noticed that monitoring has become, people have gotten crazy with monitoring in the United States. And I think it's gotten a little bit out of hand, checking everything. Because if you know what you're doing, I've said this many times, if you know what you're doing, it's not a big concern, because if you can't see that something's wrong with your eyes,
Absolutely.
I don't need to see. The machine doesn't have to tell me if my athlete's worn out. I can see it.
It's very simple. In Holland, we have a saying, meten is weten. That means to measure is to know. And everybody took it to heart and starts to measure everything they could measure with cool toys, with apps, with anything they could find. It's only toys for boys, tools for fools, because they get a lot of data.
Yeah.
I always say, well, not measuring is knowledge. Knowledge is measuring.
Yeah.
I'm not calling the weather forecast or put a thermometer because I can see it's snowing outside or the sun. I can see what the weather is. If I know what the weather is, why should I measure it?
Yeah.
You never measure what you already know. You measure what you don't know. You don't measure what you know.
Exactly.
Gathering data, it's very popular because there are cool spreadsheets and cool graphs and everything. And the second mistake is they think data equals information and information equals knowledge. And this is absolutely not true. Data is just data, nothing else. You can measure everything after workout. The length of your hair or the color of your skin, you can measure anything that you want to. The question is it relevant what you measure? Is it significant what you measure?
It's funny to hear you say that, because this echoes exactly what I've been saying, and I don't have the understanding you do, but I get the idea, though I do understand that concept. I've told people this many times. I said, look, you could have an absolute manual with all kinds of data on how to perform brain surgery. That doesn't mean you know how to do it.
Exactly.
You could have a chef and a regular person get the same ingredients in the same cookbook, and the result's going to be different.
Exactly. Of course, we give always the thing. We can know all the quality of the pigments of Rembrandt's paintings in the Rijksmuseum here in Amsterdam, but even the knowledge of the chemical composition of the paintings doesn't create a Rembrandt. You have lots of data on the chemical components in there, but and the quality of the hairs of his brushes and everything, but you never create a Rembrandt from this. And this is a mistake that you see more and more. And believe me, I measured everything. I measured every neurotransmitter, every hormone, every amino acid, every EMG, EEG, ECG. I measured everything on everybody, but to understand and not to drown in the sea of data.
It's what gave you the command on the knowledge, and then from there you kind of you have the idea. You start to understand ranges of things, and general ideas, and then from there. The knowledge is still, and this is like what I tell coaches here. I said the numbers that matter in the United States anyway are the numbers on their paycheck when they get paid from the team. That's the number that matters, because that's what they're doing this for.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's it. You get the medals, the records, and the paychecks.
I mean, because they didn't show up to you so they could be some guinea pig experiment. They came to you because they wanted to get paid for what they do, or win medals, or get a scholarship. no matter
Yep.
what it is, it's some form of monetary compensation in one way or the other. That's what, and that's the number that they came to you for.
Yeah.
And so because people will ask me, many times here, they'll ask me for a lot of this data, and I tell them I don't know. All I know is the guy can play a lot better now, and that's what matters, because that's what
Yeah.
he came to me for.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's exactly kind of the idea of I think that we need to go in, because I see a lot of younger coaches. They're kind of using this data research as a means of justifying their expertise,
Absolutely.
as
Absolutely.
opposed to just being good.
They think that coaching is a science, can be expressed in numbers, but they forget it's just always averaging. Science is about averaging, average numbers, average people. That I don't coach. I don't coach. I coach unique individuals, and the art of coaching is applying this general knowledge of science to this individual athlete. That's the art.
Yeah.
We're artisans. We're artists. We're not scientists or data crunchers or accountants. That's useless.
Yeah, exactly. It's the way of taking the data and then putting it into the hands of a skilled practitioner, and then he makes the applications. But he has to be skilled by experience. You're not skilled by any other way. You have to have experience.
Yeah.
Of having seen those things. Now, one of the other questions from our previous podcast, you mentioned that you use a mixture of percentages sometimes. You said sometimes the athletes will just like something different, and you use a mixture of percentages in some of the workouts. Do you see is I guess I don't want to say is there a rhyme or reason, but like in a particular, let's say, cycle of training, a 6-week cycle, you use, let's say, 60%. What is your rationale going into the next one, where you say, okay, now I'm going to move to 70%, I'm going to move to 40%? Are you constantly looking for, kind of going back to data collecting? Are you constantly looking for the highest power output when you go to the next phase, or are you or is there another rationale underneath that? Going higher or lower in a particular direction as the year goes on. What are you thinking when you do that?
I basically try to keep it the same, because 60% of your 1RM, you get stronger during those 4 or 6 weeks. So the 60% will increase, the number will increase. Not the 60%, but the absolute weight will increase.
Mm-hmm.
Because the 100% increases as well as a result of that kind of training most of the time. And so I keep it that way. But there's another thing, and that's kind of athletes get with a certain distance and a certain velocity or a certain weight and amount of repetition, you get into a kind of a comfort zone, a kind of a mental comfort zone that they feel really comfortable. And it is the one thing I don't like, to be athletes in the comfort zone. One or other. I'm an expert in dragging athletes physically and mentally out of their comfort zones all the time. So that's why we say, okay, that was good, 60. Now we're going to make it a little bit more difficult. We go to 30%. And I want to see you, it's much lighter, it's half the weight, but I want to see it fast. Now, I want to see if you do, for instance, a squat, can you keep your heels on the floor without jumping? Can you make a very fast squat and without jumping? So again, I get a very high power output, but then so as a variation, it's only basically a placebo thing. It's basically physically there's not much difference between 30 and 60%, because the power output is, if you see the curve here, 30% is here, and 60% is here, and probably the maximum power output might be around 40 or 50%, but there's not much difference here, because it's not like a V curve, it's more like an inverted U. It's not like one sticks out here, and when you go a little bit to left or to the right of the curve, there's a tremendous difference. No, it's more or less a rather flat top of the curve.
Okay.
It really matter if I'm at 40, 50, or here I'm at 30, or here I'm at 60. There's not much difference there.
So it's a more rounded curve within the percentage range, is basically.
Exactly. So basically, that's an easy thing. You can't go wrong. Somewhere between 30 and 60, you're okay.
So do you generally kind of live around 60, 70% in general?
No, 60, 70. 70 is on the high side, though.
Okay.
70 is on the high side. I keep it a little bit more between 40 and 60. That's about it.
And there's not necessarily a particular in stone rationale for shifting between them, other than, like you said, kind of trying to keep it fresh in one way, or to, like you said, get them out of their comfort zone. And let correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes, from what I understand, the irritant being different just for the sake of it being somewhat different within a realm of reason, but having an irritant that's a little bit different just for the sake thereof, not necessarily any deep scientific reason other than we just want to irritate the system a little bit.
Absolutely, because the brain thrives on differences, on discrepancies, on change. That's what makes the brain grow. If you Well, you notice if you go in, for instance, it's another example, but if you go in to a sensory deprivation in a tank or something, or flotation tank, the brain doesn't get any information. And then it starts to hallucinate in order to create its own information source. So the same happens to, if you do the same exercise all the time, you get into a plateauing. That's number one. It could be in strength or in speed, and also to break through that and to prevent the plateauing from happening, you just change a little bit. Or you change the focus. What is very important in power is that the transition in squats from going down from the eccentric phase to the concentric phase has to happen fast. So up and go, a sharp V. It's not like go down and go up again. No, it's go down and up, down and up. Right. And sometimes say, okay, what we do now, the same 60%, go down, hold for 2 seconds, and bam, go up with a very high acceleration from a transition from isometric all the way down to up. Those are just the little variations that you tinker away with all the time. There's always some, otherwise it becomes like bland food. It's just eating rice, you know, you want some pepper and salt or some condiments or whatever.
Right.
A little to spice it up. It's still rice, you know, they still have to eat, they still get the calories in, but there's somewhere a little change, and most of the time it's placebo effect. I think, oh, well, this is a different one. It starts to think again and starts to restructure the brain, and the brain adapts to that.
Oh, okay. So basically, like if you're getting ready for a race, you don't necessarily say, okay, this is the percentage we're in that cycle right before the race. It could be a variant somewhere in that 60 to 40 range, and there's not necessarily like a set percentage that we're using when we're getting ready for a race.
No, there's not.
And should I also make the assumption then that the distances that you're running are not necessarily paired with any particular percentage?
Exactly, because there's not a very strong relationship between the immediate outcome of the race and the percentage that you lift good or bad. In the long term, over months, you can see if people are more powerful, you can see they will run the 100 meter faster. That's an obvious one. But from week to week or from workout to workout, no, that's impossible to see. It depends too much on your readiness level.
Okay, so you really the distances that you're running. I'm assuming in general you do have an idea there of how that's going to change. You know, in general from week to week, especially leading up to a race. But the training that's off the track is not going to coincide any particular connections to that.
No, unfortunately not. Otherwise, I would be less nervous at the workout, at the competition, because then I could predict how they're going to do. I cannot, because they can do wonderful in any squat exercise, and it looks very fluent, and it still looks crappy when the gun goes off. It still looks crappy, and they're still okay. Well, how come it looks so perfect in the weight room?
Yeah.
Well, I wish there was a strong connection.
Yeah. So you're not seeing that same degree of connection, like you said. Now, when you also mentioned in the last podcast that you use a limited number of lifts in most workouts. So your workouts aren't taking a long time, terribly long time, because you're not using a ton of lifts. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's well, let me say 5-6 exercises maximum, and then somewhere between 3 and 5 sets, and then somewhere between 6 and 8 reps for the maximum. That's the average for the elite athletes weight work. I have all those workouts. I mean, I look back to the ages, I must say, from 1978 to, this is not all of them, but I look back at them, and this is about the average I could get from this. That's a general common factor there. Because why? You can spend 1 hour and a half in the weight room, but the body has a limited amount of adaptation resources. The body has a limited amount of testosterone also.
Right.
So if I do all the little exercise in my body, and I need testosterone in order to adapt, I have a limited amount, and it will go everywhere. So
Right.
then, well, there we go. You have limited resources for recovery. So if I do a 1 hour and a half, and I train every little muscle that I have in my body, I start off with a total body exercise, a large muscle group, quads and calves and glutes, and then pecs and lats and everything. But I end up with doing these exercises. Well, they also need to adapt. Otherwise, it's useless not to do this exercise if there's no need to adapt from that workout. So, and the other thing is they also need energy to adapt to the workout of the morning. Also takes adaptation energy, and the workout of tomorrow or the workout of the afternoon.
So with that being the case, then you are trying to cover the waterfront in terms of muscles that are involved in sprinting for the most part, especially the most dominant one. So if you're using an Olympic lift, obviously that's covering, a good number of them. Squats doing the same thing. You might do something that's a little bit more. You correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to do something that's going to involve maybe the push off part for the calf muscle. There might be something involved there possibly.
Step ups, lunges, all the classics there. All why you take the big muscle groups, you take them all once, and there is a more relationship between lunges and squats than there is between military press, for instance. There's no relationship between a military press, obvious.
Right. So you're looking at correlative stuff that involves the same muscle groups, but your main objective behind those is to develop power in the overall nervous system.
Absolutely.
And you are projecting it onto the muscles that are involved, but at the same time, it's the nervous system that you're after. Really, is for the nervous system to fire more powerfully, and the exercises themselves are more directed towards that than they are at particular muscle groups. Am I correct in that thinking?
Absolutely, perfect. Well, very well explained. Yes, that's absolutely it. Yeah.
So with that being the case, then you rotate movements in and out, and I know, and I hate to kind of sound like a broken record here with Dr. Bondarchuk, but because I see so many similarities between your approach, obviously not exact similarities, but some things that are really interesting, is that he likes to just rotate the movements in and out. So for 6 weeks we might use a snatch, and he'll say, okay, we've adapted. Let's go to a different movement. And what's funny is a lot of people may question and say, well, okay, why does he go from this to this? And there is no deep reason. Actually, when I ask, is it, well, because that one already ran its course. We got to use something else to keep adaptation going.
Exactly.
And so he's just rotating movements.
If you use the same exercise, you will see from the EMG that the muscle becomes very efficient. We're very efficient organisms as far as that's concerned. So the body tries to conserve energy, and once it starts to realize and to really know the exercise, it will recruit less fibers in order to do the same exercise.
Right.
So then you come up with something else, and something bring it out of the homeostatic system again, to bring it out of the comfort zone, and the body has to adapt again and has to adapt again without costing too much physical energy, but has to adapt again. And so the brain gets exposed to a wide variation of stimuli. And then it will find its own way. That's interesting, as a matter of fact.
Now with that being the case, and you're rotating them and you're using limited, numbers of lifts per workout. One of the questions that comes up, and it's interesting with a higher level athlete, and I know the answer would be different for a lower level athlete. Is there any particular time of the year where you might have the athlete working on the whole body just as a maintenance kind of thing for the whole body? It maybe in a particular period, like very early in the year. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. The one very early in the year, you do all kinds of exercises, a whole range, just to get the balance back as a compensation for muscle groups that are neglected. For instance, you work with tennis players, and most of the time it's the front side of the body. So then we also use a lot of rowing or pull exercises to counteract possible development of imbalances in the body as well. So it's a general development of the body. That's number one. That's a good thing, I think. So in the general preparation period, we use all body exercise, and then it becomes a little bit more, well, it's dangerous to use the word specific. Then we leave the general exercises out, and use that energy instead for a limited amount of more specific exercises. That's absolutely true. But
Now,
we also use
go
general
ahead.
exercise again for recovery.
Yes.
After competitions, after very strenuous weeks of traveling and competing at the very highest level, we go back to the general exercises, basically, because the specific muscles are well trained. Believe me, they're well trained. You use them all the time. Every competition, every workout, you use the quads and the hamstrings, and so they're well trained. And then we go back to the smaller muscle groups or the general muscle groups that you didn't use, or so the body, is on one hand, is forced to recover, but you kind of leave the specific muscle groups that are strained at the highest level, you leave them alone for some time to recover. Of course, you always use them, there's no doubt about it, but it is not that you focus on that. So that sounds kind of strange. We use weight workouts as a means of recovery.
Right. So should I make the assumption then, because you're using them either for recovery and or for overall body development, that the ones for the muscle groups that aren't necessarily involved in the event, closely, you may not use the same approach in terms of just developing power for them, but maybe just strength. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you would look at ranges that would be maybe, and I'll just give you an example of something that we've used, and you tell me how this would compare. So what we might do is use maybe sets that are like, maybe 70%, but they're to failure. So they might be 14 repetitions, and they do it close to failure. And the underlying concept being that we're building strength around there, but we're also developing capillarization for the connective tissue. So that we're also helping them to prevent injury later on and keeping balance. How does that compare with what you would do?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. 3 sets of 10, 12, 15 repetitions of that. And there's no negative interference with what you do in the first place, because it's not getting slow. It's not that you're getting slower, because you have been sprinting every week, twice at high speed. You've been in competition. You've been sprinting in workout. You've been exploding from the blocks. You did your power workouts. Even if you want to, then it cannot decrease. It's not that in this short period of time, because it's a short period of time that you do this, you all of a sudden recruit all the slow fiber. You become slow over that. No, it just doesn't, because also the muscle groups that you use are like back, abdominals, and body as well. So it's not that you turn in slow by doing some slow work. That's too extreme, because for months at a time you've been working at increasing speed and increasing power.
So basically, if I understand you correctly, when you're using that, really it's not a negative, and it's a positive in the sense that it also helps to create a good solid platform for the other exercises later that you're going to use, so that you don't run into any injury problems while in the weight room.
Absolutely. Very good.
And good recovery from those workouts too. Because you've got good capillarization of the tissue.
Yeah, it's compensatory exercises. It also can be explained in the framework of variation. Now do something else, so that, finally not anymore this, wow, aggressive, explosive, but do some easy things, and then they have to go a little bit. It's again in this framework can be explained as well. So variation, building a platform for the more specific exercises later on again, and also improve the recovery basically. Yep.
Okay. Now the last question for this section: what is the frequency like? Because this is one of the other things where we've seen, in different places all over the world, where the Bulgarian weightlifters have been really kind of renowned for how frequently they train. 2 to 3 times a day, 6 days a week, or even more in some cases. Or I know some of the coaches twice a day, 5 times a week. What do you normally look at in terms of off the track training? What would be your normal weekly frequency?
2 to 3 times at most.
Okay.
Because otherwise I set my priorities wrong. It's getting stronger to get faster. It's not getting stronger to get stronger in itself. It gets stronger to get faster. But if I'm a 14-year-old tennis player and I lift weights 5 times a week, but I can't even hold a tennis racket properly, I got the wrong priorities. And even elite athletes, it's a means to an end. And many people think, okay, when I get stronger, because the big guys, the very fast guys are strong, so if they are strong, I have to get stronger, and automatically I become faster. Well, this is not the case.
Right.
This is not the case. So I wish it was true. Then weightlifters would be the best sprinters, or powerlifters would be the best sprinters. And it's just not true. The same thing even applies to jumping, which is much closer. Then the volleyball players would be the best sprinters, and they're basically not, because their vertical jump, or basketball players, the vertical jump is tremendous. And even weightlifters, tremendous vertical jumps. Still, they'll never beat a major sprinter over 60 over 100 meters. So it is important, but don't overdo it. Don't make the mistake and go into that direction. There's other priorities as well. You got to learn how to start properly under pressure, under different circumstances, headwinds, tailwinds, on the different surfaces. You have to learn how to accelerate steep and long. You have to run at maximum speed. You have to do the overspeed work. You have to do the resistance work. You have to do the endurance work. There's many things to do. So if I overdo it, then it becomes like kind of a burden. You see it in proportion. So once again, 5 times a week weightlifting for a young tennis player is outrageous. If you work out, do weights every day, only when there's a very specific reason for that. When the athlete is injured, he can sprint. That seldom happens with my athletes, because none of them was had any surgery throughout the years I coached them. I coached them for 12 years, 8 years, and none of them ever underwent any surgery on the Achilles tendon or knee or whatever. Never any muscle or tendon pull. So that's already the job is already half done if you don't get injured, because the injured athlete doesn't perform. He doesn't even get to the starting block.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to perform when you can't run at all.
Yeah.
So with that being the case, like you said, 2 to 3 times a week, do you is the load, and we're going to talk about this more later, but this will be a kind of lead into on the track stuff. Would the load be altered or changed on days so let's say if you're training twice a week off the track, how is that played with on the track? So are you going to run on the same days that you're going to be off the track training, or would you change the amount of load that you would do on the track if you happen to be off the track that day too? How do those interplay with each other?
Preferably not. And here's the funny thing: if my athletes, and they won Olympic medals, if you look at the workout, you say, this can't be true. This is soft. I mean, How can they run fast doing this? Number one, the proof is there. They were fast. And number two, when you ask my athletes, and you ask them, hey, look at Henk's workout here. How can you get fast? This is so easy, so soft. I said, believe it or not, Henk's workouts are the most strenuous workouts, the hardest workouts I ever did. Because the hardness, we are sprinters here. We're talking intensity. We're talking 100% quality. That's what counts. Not how many times you can run the 100 meters in 12 seconds, but how fast you can run once.
Right.
So I spend more time in running the 100 meter once with very high intensity than to increase the volume and being able to run the 100 meter in 12 seconds 20 times instead of 10 times. That's for me, that's completely useless.
That is exactly kind of where my mind was like thinking of that, asking you, is because you only run when you go to the race, you only run it one time, or you may run it a couple of times in the same day, but you have plenty of rest in between heats. So essentially, in my mind, you're only running it once. You're not running them 3 minutes later. You don't run it again. If you run if you guys go to a meet, you have quite a bit of rest to where you're very much recovered. So really, the only thing that matters is running that race once fast, and that's it. Because that's the competition. I think this is one other place where people get off track, is that you got to train for what's going to happen on the track, as opposed to telling me how many times the guy can run it under. Who cares? They don't have a competition for that. They only have the competition for the 100.
Sometimes people think there's medals for volume, and there's no medals for volume. There's medals for intensity and quality.
Exactly.
So related to the volume.
So basically, what you're saying is, look, we're going to go in maybe 2, maybe 3 times a week off the track. On those particular days, we're not going to run on those days.
No, if anything possible, because of competitions or because of special circumstances, the weather sometimes. I know tomorrow will be terrible weather and rains. we don't have indoor facilities, so we can train indoors. Then we do, and I know today is still nice weather. Then we do in the morning we lift weights, and in the evening, or we reverse it. In the morning we do the sprinting, in the evening we do the weights, and tomorrow we'll see, or maybe a day off. So it depends a little bit on the weather, for instance, on the weather, but special circumstances.
In the ideal circumstances, they would be done on different days.
Yeah, because there's this principle of concurrency, which means there's an interference of one target in training and the other one. That's why you seldom see a bodybuilder run the marathon and a skinny guy acting as a weightlifter, because there's a concurrency, a negative interference between negative demands of training and of effects of muscle hypertrophy and let me say the cardiovascular system. They fight each other. So if they're too close together, because you have to do probably both of them, but if too close together, there's a negative interference. So we call it concurrent training, right?
There's not enough adaptive energy for both.
It's
basically what it would come down to. So once you've had a good workout off the track, you've used up your adaptive energy for that day. You got to come back tomorrow and run, and then that would make sense. So basically, you're going to run. Let me just throw this out there. Maybe 3 times a week, and maybe you're going to be off the track twice a week. Would that be kind of a general idea?
Yeah. It sounds strange, but it worked for my athletes, and there were quite a lot of athletes over the years. So that's the advantage of being a little bit older. You can try it out and see, hey, this is funny. It worked. And then you can do another, hey, it worked too. So that's and if athletes came from other coaches and used to work much harder, much more volume, much more workouts in a week, then still it worked. So that's despite the fact that they were always doubting if it was enough for them. They were always doubting, Henk, are you sure this is enough?
Right. I went through the same process, as a coach. My instinct, especially being an American, my instinct always is more is always better, especially if you're an American. We like to do everything to the nth degree. And it was interesting that I started experimenting with giving them less and less work. And it was funny. The less work I gave them, the more they improved. I couldn't believe it. And
hey, exactly the same experience, right?
So I kept dropping it down. I just said, let's see and this is something that I've told other coaches is that how do you know if what you're giving them isn't too much if you've never given them too little?
Exactly.
And so find out what's too little. I don't even know, I had no idea what too little was because I had never done it. I had never given them not enough to spur adaptation. I was amazed that the adaptive threshold was so low.
Timothy Ferris, who wrote the book, The 4-Hour Body and the 4-Hour Chef, in both books he mentioned twice my statement that train as much as necessary, not as much as possible.
Yes.
Now you ask, what is necessary? Well, necessary to improve, to progress, to get stronger, to get faster, to get better endurance. That's necessary for that. And many people, if you think about it, at least for me, it starts to make a lot of sense. Because if you look at how many athletes their career was limited or probably stopped by injuries. Well, overtraining injuries, not undertraining injuries. Now, if I work out 4 times a week or 5 times a week only, the athletes progress and they are not injured, that's fine. What other people do, we'll see on the track who is the fastest athlete anyway. So there's no way escaping. In elite sports, and especially in track and field, where the times are measured in hundreds or even thousands of seconds, there's no escaping if you were doing wrong, if you were doing the right thing. But if my athletes say, okay, the other athletes are making more progress, and all of a sudden they're way ahead. Well, all of a sudden they're way ahead. Then we can always train more. If you focus and it's not enough, I see it's not enough, then we take this Saturday, then we work out 6 times, or we can work out twice a day, or we can do something. There's always this option to do more. But when you work too hard, then you're injured because we did too much. You can't go back anymore because you're forced to go back to no workouts anymore, or to workouts, to work around it, alternative workouts. You're forced to do that. So change before you have to, because you're forced to change.
So basically, it's kind of what I've told a lot of younger coaches is always err on the side of too little.
Yeah,
If you're going to make a mistake, make the mistake on too little.
Yeah.
Don't make the mistake on too much because you'll be sorry.
Overtraining and injuries can take weeks or months and decrease the self-confidence and leaving lasting scars in the body, in the muscle or in the tendon. Undertraining, believe me, I can sort it in 3 days. If you think you're overtrained, none of my athletes tell, hey, Henk, I'm undertrained. They knew what would happen if they say, I feel undertrained.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I love, kind of hearing you say that because of already having had the success that you've had and the knowledge that you have, it resonates. It's really funny because everything that you say resonates. As you know, I publish a lot of the guys that are real experts in the world, and it all resonates. Everybody says the same. It's funny. Everybody's saying the same thing, and but I'm not seeing it play out with younger coaches yet. I'm not seeing it play out in the population. But the guys that have been around for a long time and who are really the experts, I hear the same thing over and over again. Be precise. Don't overdo it. Be precise. Err on the side of caution. And you figure it out from there. You kind of adjust as you go, but you can figure it out from there. But if you overtrain them, the one thing that's for sure is they're not going to perform well. That's you can count on it.
And sometimes you see the athletes training and working out a lot and still be successful. But that's when they have 10 years of lead training under them, behind them. Right. And not when they're 18 years old and already work out. They say, okay, if you're 18 years old and you work out 12 times a week, now you still be there and progress and improve when you're 26. How often are you going to work out? 30 times a week? If this is your way of making progress by more volume and more frequency,
right,
and a higher training density, then that's a dead end street, believe me. In the end, you can't work out. You have no time to recover. Recovery becomes a limiting factor.
You kind of like an American expression is you've already shot your wad. You already used your most powerful ammunition, and now there's nothing to go back to in the athletes later. You've already used your most powerful tools, and you want to save them for later.
Yeah, it's the simplest thing. If you want to improve, train more. But if you play that trump card already in the very beginning, then in the end you cannot train more, and then you can only increase intensity of quality, and that's a huge step right there. That's very difficult to increase intensity because the body is used to high volume and therefore and lack of recovery, and therefore lower intensity. And then you have to make a huge step, and that's why you see the injuries as well. From one step, from 1 year to another, and all the time they try to increase the intensity and maintain their volume. They still want to go back in volume. So that's where the injuries come from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Henk, this has been fantastic, and I'm looking forward to going over some more of your off the track stuff. This is just outstanding because I think it really illuminates some of the ideas that have been needed for the coaches who listen to us and who read our material to really make this practical jump from reading the books and the theoretical to talking about what are we really going to do? What are the real concepts? And I think you filled in so many of the blanks, which is really great. You've given really great practical information. Your results speak for themselves, so they back up everything that you say. And this is what I've always one of the things that I'll tell other coaches is that, look, first find out what kind of result the coach got, and then ask him what he does. Don't ask him first, and then find out what he did later. Find out the results first, then listen to what he has to say.
Okay.
Because like in your situation, like I said, I looked at the results first, and I said, okay, the results speak to expertise. So I want to know what Henk has done. But you don't want to look at, well, he's a PhD, let's ask him questions, and then find out he never got any results.
Exactly.
That's in my opinion, it's a waste of time, but I appreciate your time. It's been phenomenal. We're very grateful for your ability, number one, to answer questions like this, and your patience with sometimes probably some questions aren't so smart, but we really appreciate your time because this has been outstanding information for coaches and for me too. I'm learning as I go along here. From your experiences as well. So I'm grateful personally, as well as for all the coaches that listen to us. So I really appreciate your time. And you know that we're going to invite you back. We want you back again in a couple of weeks, if you don't mind.
No problem. My
I guess
pleasure.
I'm kind of stalking you a little bit from afar.
Okay. Okay. No
to,
problem.
to
No
pick
problem.
your
Yeah.
brain further.
Left. Okay. Left to share. Love to share this information. I think every coach, there's a lot of dedicated coaches out there with a lot of potential, very smart young guys out there. They deserve not to make the mistakes that I made in the past. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you once again. I look forward to talking to you in a couple of weeks, and we'll get one more of these off the track sessions in, and then we'll go over onto the track and kind of talk about what you do there. Jeff,
Perfect.
did you have any follow-up questions here before we take off? Okay,
Yeah.
great. We'll bring those into our next session.
So otherwise, Jeff plugs in his questions as well for next time.
Yeah, exactly. What we'll do is we'll just kind of, Jeff, we'll have you kind of lead off with us next week or the next time in a couple of weeks
Okay.
with the questions. And then that way we can kind of expand this discussion even further.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. You have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir.